Hello, everybody, and good afternoon, and hello again for the second time today. It feels like Monday, but I know it's Thursday, so I apologize for the mistakes this morning. It wasn't mistakes; it was just I didn't know how to apparently upload a premiere through YouTube Studio, but I later realized after I was scrambling that I could do a premiere right in StreamYard, and because I've never done one before, I didn't know that. So um, I hurried up and figured that out, got that uploaded. It took a little time, and we finally got it done, and we got the premiere shown, and hopefully you were able to watch it live with us, or if not, that you were able to watch it at some point before we came on today, because we're going to sort of carry on with Brian Bates' wrap up of episode 8, which is episode 9 in the Bates podcast. Because I spent so much time trying to get my video completed and all the fun things, it's definitely not the podcast that I had planned or wanted to have this afternoon, but it's okay because this gives us a chance to discuss more, talk about. We have some things. We're going to do some slides in a short video, but it'll give us a chance to kind of, get comments and questions from the chat, and then, talk up on the panel and discuss things as a panel together. So thank you, everyone, for your patience. And I want to say hello to Kay, Jack, Sherry, and Susan, and thank them for being here on the panel, and welcome to everybody in the chat. Kay, if you want to start, everyone go around and grab a quick hello, and then we'll get started.
Hello. Let's get started.
Okay. All right. Let me just get this. I'm going to add the slides to the screen in just a second. Sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh, I love red so much. So Katnit and Cherie did these slides for me, and I think they look really good. I assigned that to them, though, very late, and I kind of rushed them. But what this is going to do, what we do have, is just going to kind of whet your appetite a little bit for episode 9 in Bates' podcast, because I haven't listened to the full episode in quite some time, but it's pretty freaking awesome. It's pretty good. And I know a lot of you in the chat have watched or listened to all of the podcasts, some of you quite recently, so you'll understand what I mean by how well he did on this episode 9, because there were a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of straight out lies, and a really disgusting, as usual, Detective Kim Davis. So, excuse me. So, I want to quickly say hello, because I'm so far behind as it is today, to everybody in the chat. And we have Sheila Hawkins and Katnit and Joffrey III. Thank you for being here. And Let's see. I know we've got more. We're a little bit farther down. Um, Cherie is in the chat. Hello, Cherie. TJ is here. Great to see you, TJ, as always. And J Jack's in the chat as well. And there are a few over on Discord. Foul Plays YouTube channel watching as well. Dr. Silkman is over there watching and listening. And we welcome him, of course, as always. So, Under Your Scars, there you are. All right. If I missed your name, I apologize. It's, I mean, nothing by it. It's just been like a full week of Mondays. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to or ask, I should say, the panel to help me once again with these reading of these slides. None of them are really heavy or drastic or full of a lot of information, and oh, hi there, little Barb. Yes, you are here, and we're so glad you're here. So if everybody just or whoever wants to read them, that's fine. However we want to do it is good with me. Today is very, very relaxed because otherwise I might shed a tear. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Cherie, do you want to start with the slides? I'll go through, I'll arrow through them for you, but do you want to start? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, my dog is rambunctious tonight, but I'll give it a shot.
Well, if you can't, that's okay. I can do them, or anybody else.
That's okay. Look, I can get started at least.
Cherie, okay. You need to introduce your dog to Kay's dog, and you'll be out like a light.
Yeah, he needs to learn how that's done. So you want me to start here?
Yeah, well, it's kind of self-explanatory. We'll just go ahead and move on. Sorry.
Inconsistencies for accuser Sherry Ellis with Brian Bates. Who's Brian Bates? He's an Oklahoma native, licensed armed private investigator since 2009. He's a JD candidate at Oklahoma State University School of Law, class of 2025, specializing in criminal defense cases and engaged member of the community.
Can I ask, what does JD candidate mean?
I believe it's Juris Doctorate, but Cherie's the attorney.
Well, that's what, when you graduate from law school, at least from my law school, and it looks like his as well, you get a Juris Doctorate. That's you can say that your name, JD, but then once you pass the bar, then you can become an ESQ. But anyway, it's just the name of the degree you get. Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you.
That's I forgot I was going to keep going. Okay. How did Brian...
Is a brief summary of Ellis's...
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Okay.
How did Brian Bates become involved in Daniel's case? The telephone call. Scott Adams, paraphrasing. So how badly have you roasted my client on your website? Brian Bates. Actually, I haven't yet. I was waiting for some of the details, but it's coming. Scott Adams. I'm sure it is. Before you do that, I'd like to ask you to look over some of this evidence and give me your gut reaction. My guy claims he's completely innocent, but you know how that goes. You may know some of these women, and you may be able to give us some insights as to why they think they'd make these accusations if they're not true. Or maybe my guy's guilty and you can convince me of that. In that case, I may need to focus on a plea. Interesting. I never knew that.
I didn't either. And it's on the HoltzclawTrial.com website. And it's just one of those things that I hadn't ever read through thoroughly and thought about really. So pretty interesting.
I have heard Brian say that at first he thought Daniel was guilty.
I've heard him say that too.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a long time ago, of course, but I remember that.
And actually, if you follow where this is in the podcast, the wrap up sheet or episode 9 homepage, when you follow this down further, Brian Bates goes into a lot more detail about how he felt and what his thoughts were about Daniel initially, or his guilt or innocence rather. So yeah, it was really. But I hadn't read this, and I thought, you know what, it's on his website. I think that would be very interesting for everyone to know. So that's why I decided to add that in there. Okay, on to the next.
Kim Davis, Oklahoma City sex crimes detective, had been trying to reach 39-year-old Northeast Oklahoma City resident Sherry Ellis. On August 1st of 2014, Davis and Ellis had a telephone conversation wherein Ellis alleges she was twice raped by an Oklahoma City patrol officer at 2 different locations during the same encounter.
Okay. Somebody else want to take read a couple slides for us? Okay. Please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ellis agrees to meet with Detective Davis on August 5th, 2014 at police headquarters to discuss her allegations in detail. While Ellis never names her attacker, Detective Davis has already determined that it must be Daniel Holtzclaw, despite the fact that Ellis clearly stated that her attacker was a short, black male police officer driving the older model patrol car.
First, I want to say hello and thank you so much, Jeff Jones, for being here. I have probably missed you before in a chat of mine, but it's great to have you here. Thanks for popping in.
Good evening, Jeff Jones.
Wow, everyone say hi to Jeff.
Good evening, Jeff.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Oh, I hear never mind. I'm not going to start with songs. So, and these, there's information, the points that are brought out in these slides we heard today in the premiere in more detail, but there's no, hey, Susan.
Be honest, Rhonda. You were gonna bring up Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Welcome back, my friends.
Yes.
See,
I was.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show. Oh,
yes,
I don't want to get
yes,
a. I don't want to get a.
No, I know, but I thought, nope. Oh, never mind. I'm just gonna not do it. But thank you for doing it. It's not always just me. Okay. So yeah, you're gonna see some of these bigger points repeated. But my idea is that repetition creates memory. So you can't hear some of these things too much. They're necessary to hear over and over. And that's how I have managed to pick out some of the finer points in this different parts of this case. So that's just me. So, but bear with us because we're going to get to a short video in a few minutes. Okay. Sorry, Carrie, do you want to carry on, Kay?
Ellis recognizes the patrol car as the very common black and white older model Oklahoma City police car that most officers drove at that time. We'll see the difference here. The Crown Vic is the same car that Terry Morris pointed out. Daniel, however, drove the car on the bottom, the Ford Interceptor.
Yes. Okay.
At 5 feet 11 inches tall and reportedly not using any drugs or alcohol at the time, Ellis confidently described the officer as a black male with skin darker than her own, who is also shorter than her. In deposition, she said that Jim Hankins got her to say that Daniel was about a head shorter than she was, or that her attacker was at least a head shorter than she was, from how she demonstrated that in her interview at the police station. Okay, sorry.
Oh, no. Please add whatever you feel is relevant, please.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm not really sorry, but
No, I was going to say, don't be sorry. You're kidding me.
according to Ellis's August 5th, 2014 interview with Detective Davis, she was on probation at that time after being previously released from prison in July of 2013. Ellis had received a 3-year prison sentence for a burglary 2 conviction. She ended up serving less than a year. Ellis also has convictions for transporting a loaded firearm, driving under suspension, transporting an open container, assault with a deadly weapon, and offering to engage in prostitution.
Yeah, so something that I think I tried to point out in the premiere video from today. She said Ellis was talking about her fines near the end of that in-person interview, and she was talking about how she's late paying the fines, and to me it sounded very much like she was trying to get help from the detective at that point, but it was practically begging for help to pay her fines because she was already late for that month. And she said, I just got out of the penitentiary and I've been trying to pay my fines. And I thought, because this was August 5th, as we know, and I was thinking, you just got out of the penitentiary? And when I first was listening to this, this one, years ago, I was like, oh yeah, well, if you just got out in July, how have you been paying on your fines for months? And then I realized, no, she got out the previous year. So 13 months earlier, she had gotten out of prison. And I don't know what the amount of her fines were, but she was all pay her fines and begging for help. To me, it just sounded fishy, and it didn't make me feel very good about the way she behaved at the end of that interview.
Well,
Didn't
the
they
other thing.
also?
Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
I just wanted to mention, didn't they at trial try to say that Sherry was standing on a curb and Daniel was on the street, and that's the height difference?
I can't recall if that was at trial or if it was in the civil phase.
Oh, okay.
That was during that was during the civil phase.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah,
I think so, because it was her attorney that came up with that idea, and the curb was 6 to 8 inches tall, which
we drove by.
I went out to the curb.
Yep.
And I think it was less than 3 inches tall, actually.
Did
Yeah.
it turn his skin a different color? I'm just
Seriously.
curious.
Well, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that thinking, you've got to be, and she was saying that during the depot, and I was like, what? No, you're making yourself look even worse right now, in my opinion. And this was before, I believe that she had made all those claims before she actually, before you guys have seen what we have in the 8-minute video that we have. So it was a really big stretch to make that claim. So
but before we go forward, I just wanted to make a comment on the last slide and just say, at that point, Ellis had given Davis another way to gauge her credibility, because Davis is going to call and talk to them about the fines and that she's a victim of Holtzclaw and all of this, and that, don't. don't put a warrant out. But she could have verified if she had been making her payments $50, $50, $50 every month. And this is the first time she was going to be late, because in fact, that is not true. She was behind a couple payments months back. So she was already could have been caught in a lie, and maybe Davis saw that and she just disregarded it, like the black person that assaulted her. Oh, no problem, black guy, no problem.
Yeah, and and Davis, every time Ellis would mention something about her fines, what did Kim Davis say? That I don't care about that. Okay, all right, that's fine. I don't care about that. Well, I mean, I realized that wasn't her job as a sex crimes detective, but the way I just got a feeling about the way she just kept saying, I don't care about that. I don't care about that. We just want to focus on this. I don't care about that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, don't worry, we got your back on this. I don't know that. Those were just where my thoughts went.
Well, you could have shot the president and his dog. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Susan, it's the president and his dog.
His
Dog.
Oh my gosh. Her voice was particularly cringy in that
can't even
interview.
Do it.
It's horrible. She's horrible. She's a horrible person. So I needed to ask Kat, is this where you wanted me to play the video part? If you just want to put a yes or a no, or what are you talking about in the chat so I can know?
What's the next slide? That ought to tell us.
I think Brian Bates starts going over her version, she's this and this.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Kat says this is where it's like maybe 5 minutes long. So we will play this quickly.
Ellis's version of events. Ellis can't remember the date, but she believes the rapes occurred about 3 or 4 months prior to her meeting with Detective Davis. That puts the date around April or May of 2014. It's a little before midnight, and Ellis walks out of her house in the 2200 block of Northeast 16th Terrace that she is sharing with her boyfriend of about 19 years, Terry Mack. Ellis is heading to her female cousin Dion's house, which is about 4 blocks away. If you're following along with a map, Ellis walks westbound on Northeast 16th to the first intersection. She then heads northbound on North Highland Drive. She continues walking in the dark, past Northeast 16th Street and then Northeast 17th Street. It's at this point that she can tell there's another vehicle also driving on North Highland Drive coming up behind her. She turns, squints her eyes at the approaching headlights, and is able to tell it's a police car, and it's slowing down. Ellis recognizes the patrol car as the very common black and white, older model Oklahoma City police car that most officers drove at the time. The patrol car stops, and the officer gets out. At 5'11" tall and reportedly not using any drugs or alcohol at the time, Ellis confidently describes the officer as a black male with skin darker than her own, who is also shorter than her. Ellis also clearly recalls that she was stopped while walking next to a crepe myrtle tree that is on Highland Drive between 17th and 18th Street. The officer asks Ellis to walk to the back of his patrol car. He next asks Ellis for her name and if she has any ID. The officer then asks if she has anything illegal in the purse that she is carrying. Ellis says no and agrees to let the officer search her belongings. The officer then performs a search upon her by putting his hand in what would best be described as a karate chop position with his thumb up. He runs his hand across the outside of her clothing looking for weapons, drugs, or drug paraphernalia. Ellis says that during this search, the officer's hand made contact over her clothing with her breasts, buttocks, and vagina.
Okay, isn't that lovely? Um, so if when you listen to the rest of the podcast from Bates, um, he's going to read some transcripts from the trial that completely, uh, where Ellis completely lies during the trial about the clothes, and that kind of where there was a hint of that in the video from this morning, and that was that it, in the video, in the interview with Davis, she absolutely says over her clothes, for the front and the back. And but when it gets to the trial, and we're going to get to that ourselves reading transcripts, when it comes to the trial, that's going to completely change, and the narrative is going to be completely different, and that will add to the charges that Daniel got on Ellis's case. So listen to this podcast, or listen to episode 9 when you get a chance, and check all that out, because it's definitely interesting. Brian Bates goes hard on this episode, showing all of the inconsistencies, and something that really means a lot to me. He's going to hit really hard how all the ABL works, and how it's calculated, and it's gonna be great detail that a mind might like mine is just like spinning trying to grasp. So definitely check out episode 9 of the podcast so you can get all of that information. Okay. Jack, do you want to read a couple slides?
I sure can.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, here we go. Ellis can't remember the date, but she believes the rapes occurred about 3 or 4 months prior to her meeting with Detective Davis. That puts the date around April or May of 2014. Ellis recognizes the patrol car as the very common black and white older model Oklahoma City police car that most officers drove at the time. Ellis confidently describes the officer as a black male with skin darker than her own, who is also shorter than her. Ellis agrees to let the officer search her belongings. The officer then performs a search upon her. He runs his hand across the outside of her clothing, looking for weapons, drugs, or drug paraphernalia. Ellis says that during this search, the officer's hand made contact over her clothing with her breast, buttocks, and vagina. The officer then opens his patrol car door and has Ellis take a seat in the back. The officer then returns to the driver's seat and called in Ellis to see if she had any warrants. The dispatcher comes back on the radio and tells the officer Ellis has 3 outstanding city warrants. The officer exits the patrol car, walks back to Ellis, opens her door, and exclaims, quote, "What do you think we need to do about this?" End quote.
And Jack, I'm going to pause for here for a second. So in the premiere today, Sapper Cop was in the chat, and I love having law enforcement in the chat or in comment sections or wherever, because it's really good to get law enforcement officers' perspective or opinions. So he asked the question, or he made the comment in the chat about why wasn't she arrested? Why wasn't Ellis arrested? And how did he explain that to his supervisors that he hadn't arrested her? He says where he was a law enforcement officer, that would have never happened. It would have never been allowed. I had an idea of why I thought they might not. I was trying to explain to him that in Oklahoma City, that wasn't the normal practice. And it was really hard to do that in a chat, typing. And so Kay, as always, Kay was in the chat, cleaning up for me, so that, because I can't make a point in, 5 sentences or whatever. So she was trying to help with that. But Kay, do you want to try to perhaps address that a little further?
Well,
why.
and I meant to go into the trial transcript this afternoon and find those occasions, and I'm not positive it's the trial transcript versus depositions, but I believe it's both, where they ask um, detectives and even I believe Lieutenant Musney if it's common, I mean, to not arrest someone on city warrants, and whoever they asked, no one argued about it. No one said, oh, that's improper. They got them all to admit that it wouldn't be uncommon. And you're going to come across it more in the sector where Daniel works. Um, it's just it's just how it is. And I don't know, maybe it's because we know that some police officers do target black individuals more in a different sector where an officer is patrolling but there's really not much going on. I could see them arresting someone for city warrants just because they're bored or whatever. But if Daniel or any other officer who worked the Northeast sector there did that, they would just be taking people to jail for unpaid traffic tickets their whole shift, and they would be unavailable to respond to things. So it just was, it was okay. I said in the chat, where I live, if I had an unpaid ticket, a bench warrant would automatically be issued for my arrest. And if I got pulled over for speeding, they would take me into custody. They would take me to jail. But that wasn't the practice, at least not in some of the more, I don't know, I don't want to say high crime necessarily, but more impoverished areas where, frankly, all these accusers that we're dealing with, if you just want to look at them and not looking at the neighborhood, because if you just want to look at them, they can't afford to live and pay off their fines and do their drugs and buy their alcohol. They don't have a whole bunch of money stacked up. So, consequently, their violations stack up. That was a clunky explanation, but there it is.
The prosecution also didn't do much about that, right? They didn't harp on that.
Because they know.
Exactly.
They didn't really want to bring that up because, they know how it goes.
I swear I remember even Kim Davis saying something to the effect.
I believe so too, Susan. I have that recollection in my head. I just can't pinpoint if that was in her deposition or at trial.
Uh-huh.
Her deposition's over 5 hours long, so
Yeah,
it's hard to.
Very difficult to listen to. I feel like it was in the trial, in one of the trial transcript of somebody's. Particularly, I remember when we've covered Tabitha Barnes in the past, when Daniel, the night of the 27th of February, when he and Officer Venegas had an encounter with her in front of her house, Tabitha Barnes. I recall there being a brief back and forth between Officer Venegas and Officer Holtzclaw, and that was that she had city warrants, just like most of these ladies were going to have, and I believe in that episode that we pointed out, and this has been quite some time ago now, but we pointed out that Daniel, contemplated taking her in because it was a slow night, but also commented that if he took everybody in that had city warrants for unpaid fines and things, that he wouldn't be able to be on the street patrolling and doing what he firmly believed and was so dedicated to was his job. So, I mean, they can spend, a couple of hours or more at the jail just booking somebody in on unpaid fines. And so I think that kind of came across in Tabitha Barnes. We'll get to her. She'll be coming up in a month or two, but we'll be able to pull that out more too. So at that time. But yeah, I know where I live, and I think I said it in the chat. If it says warrant, you're going to jail. It doesn't matter what it's for, you're going to jail. But it makes sense to me that in an area like what Daniel was patrolling, it was, the concern was more about the high crime, the more serious crimes that were going on, such as drugs and dealing and gang activity and prostitution and stuff like that. So, patrolling and keeping his eye on those different areas was far more important to him than running somebody in on unpaid fine warrants. But anyway, okay, back to the slides. And honestly, I don't know where they're going to end. So we're just going to play this out by ear, read what we can, and go from there. So, Susan, do you want to read a couple slides?
Sure, Rhonda.
Thank you.
Ellis then says that all of a sudden, the officer's erect, circumcised, and well-endowed penis is exposed through the fly of his pants and is very near her face. The officer tells her to put his penis in her mouth. Ellis, fearful what the officer will do if she refuses, complies. 3 or 4 minutes into the sex act, the officer suddenly stops, removes his penis from her mouth, tells her to turn and put her feet back into the patrol car, and shuts the door.
When in the episode 9 of the podcast, Brian Bates goes into some pretty significant detail about this, and I'm just going to drop this one little tidbit. He talks about how at trial, Galen Gigger, and this is the most horrific, vile, inhumane thing I think they would have done to Daniel had it been allowed, and that was that Galen Gigger wanted to have a photo admitted into evidence of Daniel's penis. And I cannot tell you how horrific, if that had been allowed, it would have been for Daniel and for his family, man. That it would just be the most fucked up thing they could have done in the trial. So I'm just going to drop that little tidbit and check it out in the episode 9 because it's astounding.
The officer returns once again to the driver's seat and begins to pull forward away from the curb. When the officer reaches the end of the street, he jumps the curb and parks behind the abandoned school and next to what is most likely an old classroom outbuilding. The officer exits his patrol car, walks back to Ellis, opens her door, and tells her to step out. The officer then tells Ellis to pull her pants down and bend over. Ellis, scared, complies with the officer's demands. The officer then vaginally rapes her for about 10 minutes. Nothing is said by Ellis or the officer during the rape, and she is unsure if the officer wore a condom or ejaculated. When the officer is done, he turns to get back in his patrol car and simply tells Ellis to have a nice night. The officer then drove away through the schoolyard, leaving Ellis standing there in the dark, trying to make sense of what just happened.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave that, because it's you're going to get a lot more out of listening to the podcast at this point, because Bates goes hard and does some incredibly amazing deep diving into this accuser. Because on the surface, when you look at Sherry Ellis, it looks like she's just another one of these dirty accusers who has this, flimsy story with a horribly incorrect description of the cop and what he's driving, and this really weird, bizarre sexual assault or rape scene that happens. And I really should have put up my trigger warning sign for today, but at any rate, I want you to get that experience and get those descriptions and all those details from Brian Bates. He's going to read to you some key points in the trial, and he really is the one that's pulling out all of these inconsistencies in Sherry Ellis's story, and it is definitely a lot deeper. The lies and the inconsistencies are a lot more detailed and intricate than what even me listening to the podcast a couple of times, and really studying her police report and her AVLs and all those things, even more so than what I have been able to uncover, or us as a team. It's very detailed, and I just can't imagine. I mean, it didn't come out at trial. All of these details did not come out at trial, and therefore Daniel received 62 years on Sherry Ellis's accusations. Just a little, I think I've mentioned this before, but it never hurts to say it over again. In the trial transcript a long time ago, I remember reading a section where it was a couple pages, I guess, where at the end, or during the, somewhere near the end of the state's direct examination, they will always ask the accuser, do you see the man who, whatever, blah, 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 in the courtroom today? And they ask the accuser to point out, what is he wearing? Who is he sitting by? And all those things. When they asked Sherry Ellis to identify the defendant, or the man who who had assaulted her in the courtroom, she couldn't identify Daniel. She didn't know who it was. She didn't see him. And that fits with her comment in the video that we have of her during the deposition, when she says she had never seen, she's holding a picture of Daniel in her hands during the deposition, and she's, they're asking, do you recognize him? And she says that I never saw him before the trial, and that's who they accused of raping me. And it's insane. It's insane. So it all fits in. It makes a lot of sense. And again, and I know Catnet's been, dropping the link in the chat quite a bit, and that's great, because I really want you guys to go and listen to it, this episode.
And
And
he got,
yeah,
what, 63 years for her?
62
62?
years for Sherry Ellis.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, it's quite insane. But yeah, so I'm going to leave it at that. And I believe next week, we've had a premiere today that was about close to an hour. And we're doing this tonight, kind of giving you some more information or a little more detail and discussion. But as far as presenting anything else tonight, I feel like that's where I want to leave it. And oh, thank you, Kat. She's dropping information specific to Sherry Ellis in the chat right now for you guys to read. So we can open it up to more discussion and questions and comments about Sherry Ellis's case. If anybody on the panel has anything they'd like to add.
I kind of wanted to point out, and when you guys go and listen to episode 9 of Bates Investigates the Daniel Holtzclaw case, you will see his resources. So go to holtzclawtrial.com is where you should go. Actually, it has links to the podcast, but what it also has are all of the supporting documents, photographs, and he has some really nice maps. He has the prosecution's version, he has the defense's version, and what came out at trial, they questioned Davis. Did she oh wait, gosh, my brain, I swear, I think this is deposition 2, not trial, because this would have probably exonerated Daniel, so it would have been deposition. She is asked if she ever tried to do the math on using the data points from the AVL and the timestamps, if she ever tried to do the math to see how fast he would have had to been driving to get over to the area where Ellis alleges that the rape occurred. And so what Bates did was he went, and obviously I don't recall this being done at trial. You correct me if I'm wrong, you guys. But what he did was he determined that Daniel could have only gone 36 feet after he jumped the curb, according to the pings on the AVL. It pings every 5 seconds when the car is moving, and it records a speed in knots. So he took that information and he calculated.
Uh-oh, did we lose Kay? Kay, you muted yourself.
Oh, shoot. What was I saying when I was still unmuted?
Talking about how Brian Bates calculated the pings
Yeah,
and
you said he
everything.
calculated.
Okay, so he
I've got his
calculated.
map right here on the screen. Sorry.
So using the AVL, which pings every 5 seconds, and it records a speed in knots, and a time. He calculated that Daniel could have only gone 36 feet once he hopped the curb before his car stopped. That would have been right in front of the playground equipment. And so Bates hypothesized that perhaps people were in the park at that time and he stopped to tell him to go. The park is closed after I don't know what time, but this would have been closer to 1 a.m. Ellis said it was around midnight. I think Daniel's radio traffic shows that it was really around 1 a.m. But it's just things like that I mean, they just show you that his car was not stopped 300 more feet, more than 300 more feet across the park where the prosecution alleged that it was stopped. It just didn't happen that way. And it's just unfortunate that there were so many accusers and so much information and so much discovery, and tricks were played with discovery where, they would send duplicate stuff and just send it in just these huge batches it's just overwhelming, not only to read through, but to process and assimilate in your mind. I've had 7 years to do it now. I would have hated to have been on that defense team. They needed a whole bunch more people. And
Yeah.
it just wasn't financially available. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. It's a case worthy, or it was a trial worthy of a whole team of defense counsel. But yeah, like you said, it just wasn't possible. I put so I did capture a screenshot of the map in Bates' podcast, episode 9, where he gives in, that's where Kim Davis, he reads, she says all that during the trial because Scott Adams cross-examined her on all of the math and all of that stuff at trial. And she just, from the way Bates is reading it in the podcast, she just sounds like a fucking idiot, just an idiot. And she might be faking, but I kind of feel like a lot of it's true. She's really a lot more dumb than I think people she worked with must have thought. So yeah, but I just kind of wanted to point out. So this yellow line here is the way that Sherry Ellis walked, and I've shown that multiple times. Anything that's in the dark blue outline marker is what the defense claims happened. And no, that's not. What has he done there? Brian's got these a little bit mixed up, but who can fault him? It was a lot of work. It says that the defense's route is in the dark blue, but that's not the defense's route. The dark blue was Bates's route, what he believes really happened with, how Daniel ended up there. The red, excuse me, the red is what the state presented. And if you look at it, I mean, if you stretch those lines out, it is a lot more distance and time that the state is showing because they need that. They need it to be more time to make their narrative fit. And then, of course, the light blue here is the route that Daniel did take. And this, where it starts right here, the blue, light blue, is where he stopped Sherry Ellis originally, and I believe also let her go at that time. And then he travels, and we've talked about this several times, I think, some of us. He drops her, he pulls her over, stops her. He's there for about not quite 15 minutes. I can't remember for sure, but I want to say around 13. And there's some hanky business with the AVL that I've been mapping out and working on that doesn't fit the state's claim of him at the what the ABL says. At any rate, this is where he stops Ellis, and then he's done, doing his investigation or whatever, and then he goes up to 18th, Northeast 18th, turns right, hops that curb, and like Kay said, whether here in this little park, he's shooing, people away and, go home, get out of here, whatever, hops that curb, and then travels on to Miramar. And then he, according to the AVL, he heads straight up Miramar and then turns left on 19th Street, Northeast 19th. It makes sense to me that, he might do that, because if you think about it, going this way, it kind of is a shortcut in a sense, where he can just jump, right through the park. And we've all been there. Well, with the exception of Jack, the rest of us on the panel have been there. We stood right there. We stood at this area right there, and we've looked, and we really took notice of all of these houses right here. I think there were like 6 or 7 of them just right there in that section. Ellis claims that she was taken right here between these 2 red lines here, and that this is where she was assaulted. Now, there's a tree there, but even when we were there last July, that tree was not big enough to conceal a vehicle parked there so that somebody could rape somebody or assault or beat or whatever, do drugs, whatever. Somebody would have most likely noticed something, I think. I don't know. That's, again, that's just what I think, I may have happened, could have happened. But, we don't know that. But here's the thing. Even though detectives believe that Ellis was taken here and all this route and that, he leaves her there and then he drives off, according to the state, that way. None of the detectives came over to this row of houses here and asked them if they saw or heard anything. Isn't that, what do they call that? Canvassing the neighborhood or something? Nobody did that. And so did Kim Davis do her due diligence investigating Sherry Ellis's story? Not only did she not talk to, the people right away that were directly involved with Ellis, like her ex-boyfriend, Terry Mack, and, nobody ever bothered to, there was no sense of urgency to investigate and question other people involved in her life as a part of Sherry Ellis's life, nor did they bother to canvass any of the areas that Sherry Ellis claimed to be that night. Although, Kay, if I'm not mistaken, I think we did, there was a determination that this lady here across the street right here was talked to. Was that in Ellis's case? Or I believe Davis said that she, oh, never mind. Sorry. This
I
is
don't
so
remember
common. It wasn't. Now that I'm
Was
thinking
it
about
Rosetta?
no, it was Rosetta. But yeah,
Yeah.
Rosetta. Sorry, Sherry, it was Rosetta. So anyway, but nonetheless, none of the investigators bothered to canvass that neighborhood or try to, ask anybody if they saw anything. No, they just, everything was just, just believe what the accuser says. Don't do any follow up. And I feel like the reason there was no follow-up or no real investigation or, you know, looking for possible witnesses, because they didn't want to take a chance that they might find out that their accuser is just full of shit, or that they might have to explain a bigger inconsistency. Although I don't know how they get any bigger than Ellis claiming
Or
her encounter was black. So
someone watched the entire encounter,
what's that?
or somebody watched the encounter
Yeah.
with Daniel out the window
Yeah,
and knew that nothing happened.
yeah. So anyway, it's as much information and detail and lies and inconsistencies as there are in all of the accusers' stories. It's There's quite a bit involved in Sherry Ellis that I don't think especially myself, I didn't really appreciate how deep the lies and inconsistencies with Sherry Ellis's story really went. So
I don't really think Sherry Ellis ever left 18th Street with Daniel.
I don't think so either. Thank you
I
for
I
don't
saying
think
that.
either.
they had their encounter. I think he drove off. He obviously had his eye on her because he ran her the day before through Varuna. I mean, she obviously walks every day wherever she goes. She doesn't have a car. She's has a common law husband, but she has a boyfriend that she's been seeing for I'm not sure what the time period was. We know it wasn't more than a year because she just got out of prison the year before in July. Um, but she walks everywhere she goes. Um, and that's the area that he patrols. So, he knows she just got out of prison. He knows these things about her. He's watching her.
Yeah. Watching her in the sense, not in a creepy way, but in a proactive law enforcement way. That's what he was
Well,
trying to
is she a
do.
prostitute still? Is she prostituting herself? Is she buying drugs? Is she going to go to the drug houses that he's watching? Is she selling drugs?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those sorts of things. What is she doing?
Right. At 1 o'clock in the morning. Oh, that's
And that's common to see people out walking in that neighborhood
yeah.
at these odd hours. So, and Daniel knows that too. So, raping these women in the middle of the street or on the side of a house of a busy street or um, at the rapey schoolyard by a small tree in view of 7 houses, um, all these things after he's called him in and put himself out with them
Yeah.
too. So any other officer could drive by and he knows that too. None of this shit makes sense. Come on, man.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. It's just it's completely illogical. Every one of these accusations and accuser stories are completely illogical, especially when you've got a private investigator like Brian Bates doing the hard work uh, to show what happened. And this is this is just one reason, one episode of why we are so determined to keep working to try to get a new trial or something in Daniel's case, because they're really, once all of these inconsistencies are pulled out and proven to be you know in conflict with the original story, um, why wouldn't any um, just truthful court uh, agreed that he should have a new trial at the very least. So that's why I keep doing what I'm doing, and I believe everybody else here as well. Kat asked the question. To me, it's rhetorical, but I am because this happens over and over again. But she asked the question, why wasn't their conversation recorded while bringing Ellis to the locations? Well, because they. Why wasn't the travels with Terry Morris when Musney and Rocky Gregory took her to her alleged assault locations? That wasn't recorded either. So, and they have an answer for everything when they get on the witness stand at trial, these detectives, and it's not logical answers, especially when it's Rocky, but, don't make sense whatsoever. So, and then wouldn't an investigator seek out another witness to confirm and build a case for court? That's what that's what I've always known. But techno is hard. Exactly. Techno is hard. Yeah, that they should be. I believe, it's not just from watching crime shows on TV, but watching, reports of real crimes, that the detectives and investigators are going out and canvassing the neighborhood, asking questions, for witnesses or, whatever they can get. Jason Truth is over in Foul Plays chat. Welcome, Jason. He asks, is this related to Black Lives Matter in terms of accusations on this fine, decent white cop was set up for sure. So unfortunate, sad, and evil what happened to Daniel. We agree. And Black Lives Matter absolutely played a part during the trial. I mean, it was their show outside of the courthouse every day during the trial. So by this time, Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri had been killed, and Ferguson had, gone through their riots, and there was just a lot of, from what I can recall from that time period, there was quite a bit of unrest and things going on, racially motivated things going on around the country. So,
which everyone asked detectives, Lieutenant Musney, Chief Bill City, they all were unaware, according to them, that this stuff was happening. It didn't play anything into their the way they dealt with the Holtzclaw case and Janie Ligon's initial allegation. Always thought that was bullshit. And then I came across this podcast that was recorded in September of 2019, and they're interviewing by this time former police chief Bill City. Let me just read a little bit from the transcript of that. It just blew my mind when I heard him say it. So the host says, but we want to talk about the really, really kind of hard subject of race in America, and really race and policing really comes to a crossroads a lot. And you and I have had to deal with this quite a bit, and kind of talk to us a little bit about where you're seeing law enforcement when you first started, and where law enforcement was when you just left, and kind of maybe where you see law enforcement. And he says, well, I mean, as far as race relations, and it ebbs and flows. Enforcement, everything. if everything's going really, really smooth, you think it's not an. I think there's been it's not as much ebb and flow. I'm reading his words, so this isn't me not being able to read. Okay, this is him speaking. This is him trying to speak. It's really been really, I mean, topics and discussions about race, and I mean, I think the positive thing I see with everything, and I kind of embraced that when it happened. And you don't embrace the fact that you're going to have to work a lot harder and you're going to have to be involved in discussions. You're going to have to take criticism as a head of a major agency. But I always try to embrace those types of things because good things come to that. And I think law enforcement became a lot better, or is in I mean, it's constantly changing, but it's become a lot better since that happened, and the discussions are like 2014, 14, and is when that happened. And at the same time, we had Holtzclaw. The Holtzclaw case, and it was something that I'm looking at, and you've got Ferguson, you've got Holtzclaw, and it's all related to the Black community. And of course, he was abusing Black females, and you're going, this is the perfect storm for a lot of negativity on us and the law enforcement by having something happening on the heels of that when things are already tense and inflamed, right? So Ferguson was 2014 and Holtzclaw was 2015, 16, well 14, his actual, that's the arrest, and stuff were made in 2014. And for our audience members that might not, oh, okay, this is the host popping back in. For our audience members that might not, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about because I'd actually moved to Oklahoma City right after. I think he was that arrest, and it was shocking because it was national news, and I was right here in the city. All of a sudden, I'm in the city where this has happened. Can you tell our audience a little bit of background on what that case was? City. Well, I mean, Holtzclaw was an Oklahoma City police officer that primarily his area of responsibility was in Northeast Oklahoma City, which is primarily the African American community. And so he worked that area, and he was taking advantage of women that were, addicted to drugs, things like that. People that were women that were very, very susceptible to abuse, especially by a person in power. So, and I've always said when that happened after the arrest, it was really it was it was the worst abuse of police power that I ever witnessed in my 41 years of policing, because you had about 13 women that were sexually molested, and some of them, I don't know each of them in their cases, but a lot of them were raped, right? They there were rapes, and there were, there were sexual misconduct. There was right there was a combination of that, and so I can't remember the exact number. He went to court and found guilty on that and received about 267 years total. So he just recently appealed it, and that they upheld the conviction. So, David Prater's office did a very good job with that. And I think everybody did, including the African American community overall, did a very, very good job with that. And it was a very trying time. That's when it's time, a lot of time providing information and educating people on what the process is and what we've done and what we did. So, because I mean, it's easy to blame the police department, obviously, because he was an officer. It's it was uh, it was a tough time and something. So, anyway, it goes on. I'll put a link in the private chat to this if anyone wants to go listen to it in its entirety. If someone can grab it from the private chat and post it. I'm not logged in anywhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah, one of us will grab it.
And then there's another one that you guys can find in that same series from Deputy Chief Coleman that's also interesting. Is everyone awake?
Oh, yes. Well, I am. I think everybody's just listening, trying to.
Yeah,
know.
that is just so telling. And he was the man in charge. And they had that
Yeah.
meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just before they went and interviewed Daniel.
Yeah, they've never
And-
placed Chief City in that meeting. I bet he was there, but they never placed him there.
Oh, yeah.
That's for Coleman to take the heat on.
Yeah. Well, and I just kind of made a comment in the chat too that Daniel absolutely despises former Chief Bill City, and Bill City's background isn't clean either. Like, he had some issues, back in his patrol days. So, it just, there's so much hypocrisy, among other things, of course, in what these prosecutors and detectives, and I mean, I don't really have anything on the detectives that I've been able to find necessarily, or Lieutenant Musney, but there's certainly dirt dug up on David Prater, on Chief Bill City, on Galen Gigger. So
Disgraced former Judge Henderson.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
City was, at least, that in 1979, it was racist comment to a subject.
Yes.
Very ugly. So
Yeah, it was trying to think of. Sorry, Sherry. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, I'm
apologize.
done. I just said he shouldn't be talking about anybody.
Oh, yeah, no, because, well, first of all, he wasn't really talking. I mean, the way poor Kay had to read it, he was more like mumbling. He sounded a little more like Rocky Gregory to me. But anyway, yeah, he just really. But it just depends on who you are, I guess. No matter where you live, what city you're in, what county, state, whatever, I guess it's just who you know and who you are. Because, Bill City was able to get promoted and, it to chief and be able to say the things in the letter that he did to Daniel, the termination letter, but also have his own dirty background. But that's okay. He just, and here's the other thing, listening to Kay read that transcript, he's not even clear about how many accusers there were, what charges there were. He got the amount of time wrong for Daniel, thank God. He said 267. The total amount was 263. Might as well be 263 million at that point. But it's just he doesn't even know what he's talking about, yet here he is, speaking about Daniel's case on a public podcast. Dr. Silkman says in the foul play chat, under no circumstances can they back down from their convictions. They are forced to go the whole 9 yards. It's exactly like Fassbender and Uyghur regarding Brendan Dassey. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. They're going to protect and guard that conviction. Oh, Barry. Yeah. That's what I wondered if that was Barry. Sorry, I'm having a conversation independent of everybody else. But yeah, you know, people are, I don't know, this corruption in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma County, has been going on for so many years that it makes you wonder, can it ever really be cleaned up? Can it ever really be repaired even to a mediocre degree? I feel fortunate with Vicky Behenna, well, the DA who replaced, thank God, David Prater. I have some hope with her, but Daniel's case isn't one that she's looking at right now. I guess I don't really know, to be quite honest, but it's not one that that many people might want to. She might not want to look at it right now because there's a lot to have to face and expose. That's the word I was looking for. That she might not be prepared to do it this. I don't know. I don't fucking know. All I know is that she's the only one in anywhere in that system that I have some modicum of hope for helping with Daniel. And I know Daniel's family feel that way. They have a lot of hope with Behenna as well. So, or I know his parents anyway. So
I was wrong about the other podcast being Coleman. It's actually a bigger link to this whole thing of why would they do this to Daniel Holtzclaw? Because it is former police chief M.T. Berry, the first black police chief in Oklahoma County. And at the time of this arrest and the Janie Liggins traffic stop, M.T. Berry was the assistant city manager. And what do assistant city managers do? They worry about money and stuff, assets. And Oklahoma City had some assets they had been working hard to build, and they for damn sure wanted to protect them. And I would love to hear the conversations that happened between former police chief, current assistant city manager M.T. Berry, and current police chief Bill City, and probably even the mayor and the district attorney. I mean, it's all incestuous anyway. So, but it's just very interesting to have someone so connected to the Oklahoma City Police Department in the position of worrying about assets. And, who does the police chief report to? Anybody know? The city manager.
I was going to say the mayor. Okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, the city manager. I don't know. So why Daniel Holtzclaw? We can only guess.
I think somebody was going to be the sacrificial lamb. That's just my opinion.
Oh, they weren't having another setback with they were on a timeline with the MAPS projects. They were going well. People were voting for the these maps taxes, all these improvements were being paid for in real time by taxes that the public voted for, because they were saying, hey, do you want to have a penny sales tax or a penny tax increase? And we're going to get this, and this. And people are like, yeah, we want those things. It's tangible. And people just kept voting for it. They kept passing these tax incentive what do you call them? Anyway, the people wanted the things, so they were being funded, and they were building and rejuvenating things at a rapid pace, and they still are. They
could not afford a riot.
They didn't want to afford a riot. I mean, Oklahoma is so freaking obsessed with being top 10 when we're like bottom 10 and everything. I mean, people just say shit with a straight face that isn't real, and it's like, I guess if you say it with a straight face, maybe people just might believe you or whatever. I don't know. Never been one of those people. I don't know. I shouldn't get off on that. I'll shut up now.
No, I like it when you. I'm.
I mean, it's really everything. Yeah, that's behind this. I mean, it's the basis.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's also dirty.
It is so dirty.
And they'd had setbacks. They had setbacks, and I think I've mentioned this before, but the Oklahoma, they were going gangbusters with the MAPS projects, and the Oklahoma City bombing happened there, right there downtown. And I mean, that was a huge setback, and they had just really gained a lot of momentum at that point. And they for damn sure weren't going to have a riot, which would have been, I don't want to say worse than the Oklahoma City bombing, because, well, I don't know. I guess as many people could have been killed, but it's never so tragic like that. That's hard to, it's still hard for me to wrap my mind around what happened with the Oklahoma City bombing.
Well, and it's not, I mean, everything is, I don't know what a word there, I know there's a word for it, but everything is relative, I guess, to the time and to what's going on. And, to have riots in 2014 or 2015, that was the concern at the time. And, and those who were the protesters who were outside of the courtroom and inside the courthouse, who were making their very, I don't know, not, well, vile, I guess is a word, but they're very, they were just very angry. Yeah, angry and heated and determined. And it just felt like, well, I act like I was there, but from everything I've watched and read and listened to, it just seemed like, you get the very distinct feeling that and Grace Franklin even said it in one of the video news clips, they don't want us, to riot over here and tear things up over here. We're not going to mess up. We're not going to ruin and destroy our own neighborhoods. So where are we going to go?
And they're not going to let us do it over there, she said.
Yeah,
meaning downtown, Bricktown.
Yeah, exactly. So, they were absolutely, uh, counting on trying to riot the way it sounded. They wanted a riot.
Well, they obviously had discussed it that if the verdict doesn't go our way, what will we do? And they had already decided that they would riot. And we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it here, like you said, and they're not going to let us do it there, which I don't know. I guess when you get a big enough group of people, you're in control.
It
We
just
saw
breaks
that.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we saw that in
Yeah.
many cities
Yeah.
over the last many years.
And the fact that the jury could hear their loud protestations is just
Yeah, 36
unbelievable.
counts, give him life. Racist cop, give him life. Those were the two most prevalent chants. And Susan's right. The judge, at some point, Scott Adams asked the judge, pointed it out, and the judge just he said, yeah, we can hear it in here. I know the jury can hear it. I'll just instruct the jury to disregard what they're hearing. And they never made the protesters move farther away. They gave the protesters that permit to do it right there. So they knew that it would be heard inside the courtroom. They were in control of the permitting. So it's ridiculous.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think in the transcripts when Scott Adams and Galen Gigger, although I think his concern was fake, because I think Gigger would want. Although when I think about it, the last thing he would have wanted was a mistrial. So perhaps he was concerned about the chanting and that. But it's it's a mob mentality. I mean, we saw that in what 2020. It's a mob mentality. People are out, possibly, joining a peaceful protest, not really understanding what they're protesting, what they're marching for, what the message is. But then, for sure, when the begins, it's a mob mentality, and it's like a pack of uh, rabid wolves. And I can imagine, had there been riots in after if Daniel had received a not guilty on everything, there would have it would have just been a mob mentality that would have you know it would have spread. It would have spread no matter where they started it. It would have spread, and it would have moved downtown to Bricktown. And they're just not the city. They're just not going to take a risk. And that's why I feel like it goes so much deeper to protect the verdict, among other reasons, of course.
Yeah, Dr. Silkman made an excellent point that maybe you put on the screen, and I wasn't on this screen at the time, but protection
Yes.
of the verdicts at any cost. It's a common theme in wrongful conviction cases. They protect each other. And he's absolutely right. I mean, there is someone in a position from tip to tail that is dirty, that is on board with the machine. And we've seen it in Daniel's case. I mean, we've seen it. His case gets placed in all these people's hands who are going to do whatever it takes to protect the conviction. And it's really disheartening
It is, and
from someone who, has invested so many hours and years into trying to get justice for Daniel.
Yes. And it's the same in Wisconsin with Stephen and Brendan. It's people would rather die than to see either of those cases, not even overturned, but just get a new trial. Either way.
Absolutely.
And so, it's I know I've talked about this in several other podcasts, but I didn't realize how corrupt Oklahoma or Oklahoma County, Oklahoma City was until we read through uh, Death and Justice by Mark Furman. Um, and I was surprised when we didn't, I think we still have 2 chapters left that I haven't finished because I'm lame like that. But um, uh, at by the end of one of the executions, and his name has escaped me now, the young man that was executed. But that's what Mark Furman went to Oklahoma City for, he had heard about, this Oklahoma death machine or something to that. It's in the title of his book. I can't remember exactly what it is, but he had heard about it and he went to investigate, find out, what are these things that I'm hearing about Oklahoma City. And so he went to investigate, and he admits at some point during the book that he is a dedicated Republican and he believes in the death penalty. And by the time he finished or was nearly finished with his investigation into Oklahoma City and their death penalty, their prevalence, their
Death,
like
death row
obsessiveness with death
machine.
penalty, death row machine. Thank you. Um, he said he was like he was having second thoughts about the death penalty, and it's I don't know. You can turn a man like Mark Furman against the death penalty, or even questioning the death penalty. That's a pretty big deal in my mind. So, and yes, it's the same Mark Furman who was in the O.J. Simpson case on trial, made all of his nasty, disgusting comments on a hot mic and recordings or whatever it was, and same one. But he's written some really good. He wrote a very good book in Death and Justice, and it's not a long book. Um, I have read and recorded, I think, 10 chapters, and those are in Discord very early on in all of my learnings of how to do things like this. So they're not the best recordings, but it's really interesting to hear his investigation play out and talk about, he talks about the wrongful convictions and the wrongful executions that he learned about in Oklahoma City. So he goes all the way back to Bob Macy days and talks a lot about Joyce Gilchrist, the crime lab analyst who was, partnered up with Bob Macy, and who happens to have been the supervisor / mentor to Elaine Taylor, who processed the evidence or the so-called evidence pants in Daniel's case. So it's all very connected. Like Kay said earlier, everything is connected somehow, and it's almost creepy how it just seems to have, been a following throughout all these years. So yeah, Kat has put a link to that book in the chat. Pick it up, if it's available on Audible, listen to it on Audible. Really interesting book. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. So yeah, there's a a lot more. And I have older videos where I attempted to, this is before I knew what I know now, but I have older videos on, I have one on Galen Gigger, Elaine Taylor, Kim Davis, Rocky Gregory. And, I know more now than I knew when we did those videos. So, go check those out. If you get bored, definitely some interesting information for sure in those episodes as well. And there might be more than one on Gigger because there was some information uncovered about Gigger where one of his teenage sons at the time, he was a teenager, was involved allegedly in, sexual assault of some younger teenage girls. And that got covered up and moved real quick. And, and then of course, we have Timothy Henderson. And, it wasn't just Timothy Henderson who was, unethical and, sullied the oath and, his position in the bench in the court. It wasn't just him. It was also at least 2 prosecutors in the DA's office. And one, I guess it's debatable if both of the women were consensually involved with Henderson. But there were also, and it's really weird because I haven't heard any more about these, but there were also 2 defense attorneys who had made serious sexual assault claims against Timothy Henderson. I don't know what happened to those. I haven't heard or. Go ahead.
Weren't there 5 altogether, and we only know of 2?
2, yeah. What happened to the other 3? They just.
Well, apparently some of them would cause big problems, and because, how many, we have 3 new trials that were granted, at least that I know of, as a result of Henderson prosecuting or Henderson trying, being the judge on a case for one of the females being the prosecutor. Oh my God, could I say that more shabbily? I don't think so. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. You're speaking my language now, Kay.
Oh my God, I know. I sound like Rhonda.
You do. Welcome to my hell.
Yikes.
It is hell being me.
Oh man. Anyway, why are we hiding those 3? I mean, initially Prater didn't feel the need to not say a number. He's the one who said the number, right?
That's right. Yep.
I bet Lori McConnell, I have always guessed that she might be one of the women.
Yep.
We don't get to see the subpoenaed evidence that was used by the grand jury to decide if Timothy Henderson, if they were going to file sexual assault charges on him based on these allegations by these women. That is all protected within the rules of the grand jury and the way Oklahoma handles evidence and cases that are tried by the grand jury. I have no idea how we could ever get that. And I'm sure it's handled inside the grand jury so that we can never get it.
Right.
Because if we did, there's all kinds of ex parte communication going on in there. There's all kinds of shenanigans that could have been happening overlapping the secret hearings.
Right. Yes.
Which, if you don't know about the secret hearings, that's just another atrocious part of this case that makes you wonder if you're in the United States of America or not.
Right. And that's more documentation that is forever sealed and kept from the public. And there's a video on that as well. And it's it's older as well. Maybe at some point, I hopefully I can go through and update some of those. Now that I have more knowledge and information for sure, but because I'm telling you, it's not just what we see on the surface with Daniel's case. Um, it's a pretty deep and dark system there.
It
Uh,
may not be forever sealed as far as the stuff within the secret hearings.
yeah,
I
hopefully.
mean, but you know what has to happen for things to be unsealed? New people in power that are honest have to give a shit and get actually placed in that position of power. Um, People have to die. The
Yes,
people that the people that would get sent to prison after they all die, then there's
yeah,
really, it's like, oh yeah, that dead guy did that. He was a real son of a bitch.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
that's how we handle that, so the lawsuits aren't
Yeah,
more
don't pile up.
more lucrative. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
shit, what they did to Glenn Simmons, like, what was his sentence, Rhonda, or Jack
um,
actually was looking at that too. 40,
48 or I keep
yeah,
54 keeps running in my mind, but I don't know if that's right.
high 40s. I know.
Yeah, for sure.
In prison for nothing. He wasn't even in the state when these two people were murdered. He was not there. He was in Louisiana.
Yeah,
Crazy.
but
Oklahoma, man.
yeah, it just took forever to get him out. And
Took
I
Vicky
just,
Behenna.
yes, exactly. That's why I have hope with Vicky Behenna. So yeah. Oh, yeah, and then this is just going to go full circle to another case that we talk about. I wouldn't say regularly, but certainly when there's news about the case, we definitely talk about it, and I try to cover it. And that's Richard Glossop, man. That telling you what, that has to be the most egregious, outrageous situation going on in Oklahoma prisons right now, the whole Oklahoma system. And we're still keeping our ear to the ground on that one. I haven't heard anything since the Supreme
Didn't
Court
SCOTUS say
decisions.
they were
Yeah,
going to hear that case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they are going to hear it.
yes. So, but there's so anyway, that's hope for Richard Glossop. It's another however long it's going to take that he gets to be alive and not go back to the fucking death chamber for another
Hey,
last meal.
the legislature yesterday, I think it was, the Oklahoma legislature passed out of committee a bill putting a moratorium on the death penalty for 2 years.
Really?
Yeah, I could see it passing. I mean,
A
it could
moratorium as in like abolishing it in Oklahoma?
It's
not
just
not
stopping it.
abolishing it, just pausing it for 2
Pausing it
years.
for 2 years. It's because they got fucking problems, man.
Yeah, and Richard Glossop brought that to light for, I guess they could look at his case because he's white.
Yeah.
It's easier to do that in our Republican racist bullshit state.
Yeah. It's just, but still, even it's still horrible what they've done to Richard Glossop, or what they continue to do to Richard Glossop.
Oh,
And
no
thank God
shit.
SCOTUS has, agreed to at least move on it. So, yeah.
You know what
Wow.
happens when you bring celebrities in?
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
at the West Memphis Three. Bring in the celebrities, things change.
Yeah.
celebrities come on to Richard Gossip, although it took a lot more because Susan Sarandon was involved. I don't know how long ago she came on to it.
Yeah.
But somehow when Dr. Phil came along, it's like all of a sudden more people. It's amazing the amount of people who worship Dr. Phil.
I know. And you know what? I'm not a
Give him hard
fan.
time.
I'm just not a fan. I mean,
I
he's doing.
I liked the Dr. Phil that was on Oprah once a week or something.
Yeah, yeah,
But then he changed into a machine of marketing and celebrity and all of that. And he's not the same person he was as when he was still a practicing therapist.
right.
Not to say that he doesn't do a lot of good, but he does a lot of bad too.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much more arrogance in his tone now than
Uh-huh.
than the 80s and 90s or the 90s, I guess,
Yeah.
and early 2000s. And I just, I don't know. I'm not very fond of arrogance like that. But that's just, how I, feel like some of his shows have gone. Every once in a while, I'll try to catch something that looks interesting, but for the most part, I'm really not so interested in him. But listen, if he's going to do something, which he did, yeah, young Dr. Phil was good. I agree, Sheila. To help somebody who was wrongfully convicted, like literally, to help them to not be executed. Um, I'll listen to all the arrogance he's got at that point. So, well, listen, guys, what a great discussion. At least I feel like it's been a great discussion. We kind of had a potpourri of, different things once we finished, deep diving. Well, not deep diving, but, focusing on Sherry Ellis. It's been a really great conversation. And so I really appreciate everything, that you've contributed, Kay, and everybody else, Jack, Cherie, Susan. Um, and then everybody in chat. There's been great, comments in the chat, and Catnet has been on fire with the links. Dude, you guys should not have anything. You shouldn't have to search for anything to watch or listen to, until the weekend when we get to reading with the crew on Saturday afternoon. Because Catnet's dropped a lot of really good links. Kay's had some good links also, and so. First and foremost, though, I'd really like everybody to go listen to episode 9. And then, let us know in Discord how, what your thoughts are on it, because it's pretty astounding, what Brian Bates did in particularly in Sherry Ellis's case. So that would be, is that something you want me to post, Kate?
Yes. Well, unless Catnet already did. The link
What
she
is that?
posted, Susan said didn't work, so that one might.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can.
The one
mark it.
about Glossop's case.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Kat's dropped it. It looks like.
Oh, I
So,
see.
yeah, she's on fire, man. Catnit is on fire with the links. I'm so impressed and so pleased. I'm not impressed. Not that I'm not impressed, but I'm not impressed because that's just who she is. So, I know that, you're going to get great stuff from Catnit when it comes to links. And,
Good night, Sheila.
Are you taking off, Sheila? Okay, sorry. Yeah, we're going to wrap it up here as well. And, let us know, what you think of episode 9. And next week, we're going to read, so prepare for a long one. Well, probably, I don't know how long it'll be, but we're going to read the preliminary transcript for Sherry Ellis's case. So be prepared for that next week. And who knows? Now that I know how to do a damn premiere through StreamYard, I don't know, maybe I'll drop something else because, that's kind of cool. So anyway, any last comments or anything from the panel on tonight's discussion or whatever else you might have? Jack?
Yeah, no live stream from us this weekend. Doc and I are going to take the weekend off, take a
Okay.
break,
Okay.
come back
Good.
next week after. Yep. So that's about all I've got. Great discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Jack. And thank you for being here and helping out as well, as always. Yeah, I didn't know that there's going to be a break Saturday. So yeah, you guys definitely need a break. Definitely with all that you guys are, putting out all the time. So good to know. Susan.
I think it was a good discussion tonight. A great discussion. We covered a lot of different aspects of this case. So very interesting.
Yes, very much so. Thank you, Susan, for helping with reading and comments and questions. And Cherie.
I agree. I enjoyed the discussion as well. I mean, enjoy is a weird word to use in cases like this, but it was interesting and good. Thank you.
And again, I want to thank Cherie and Catnet for trying to take on the big task, the big ask that I threw at them, I think Monday, for help. And they came through, of course. And so I really appreciate that very much. And
Definitely a great job on the slides. Great job.
yeah, much better than what I can do. I went in and tried to help today, and I was like, I said I can't do anything. I'm gonna mess it up. And so I was like, no, I'll just do what I know how to do, and you guys, and whatever you can get done, that's what we'll use. So, that's I appreciate everything that they've done to get that ready. So, so if we don't have any other comments or questions to address, we are going to be back next Thursday at 5 p.m. Central, reading some trial transcripts. And until then, peace out.